The Dow plunging over 2,200 points, or about 5.5%. The Nasdaq Composite losing 5.8%, and the S&P 500 down 6%. A lot to discuss about all of this, so I do want to bring in David Grasso, political analyst, to discuss all of this here. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to join us bright and early on this Sunday morning.
Well, the name of the game is uncertainty, so let's talk about it.
Exactly. So how are these tariffs, and we're going to get right into it here, affecting and impacting global trade overall?
Well, it's upending it. The Wall Street Journal called it blowing up the current system. So it's completely rewriting the rules. It doesn't mean it's over. It just means substantial changes are in the works. And really, that's the problem right now, because the philosophy underpinning tariffs, we can argue about that all day, but there is a case to be made for more manufacturing independence here in the United States. The problem is that businesses and countries who heavily export to America, the world's largest economy, are really unsure what this all means. And that's why investors are so jittery, and that's why we saw the two largest declines in the stock market since COVID in 2020. And really, historically, we haven't seen this fast of a decline ever. So that's what's really going on, and no one really knows how this is going to shake out. If you open the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal right now, there's article after article after article about what this all means, but really, fundamentally, we don't yet know all of the details.
Exactly. And what has been the direct impact of the tariffs on U.S. manufacturing, production? Again, a lot of questions here that we don't necessarily know yet, but we're still trying to piece together and see how it plays out.
Well, like during COVID, we all became shut-ins, as we all remember, right? And we learned something about supply chains, how fundamentally complicated it is to get the shirts on our backs or the food in our house or the cars in our driveway. And supply chains are very complicated. And a lot of times an auto part can cross a border 8 to 10 times before it's put in your car. And these are supply chains that have come about in the last 50 years because free trade has been an assumption for most businesses around the world. Now, this is suddenly a huge break with that, saying, hey, we have huge incentives, or rather disincentives, to manufacture abroad. You should instead bring your factory and your supply chain back to the United States, or at least nearshore it in Mexico and Canada, although we're not even sure about that. So this is a huge change. And, these business decisions take a long time. These supply chains take 5 to 10 years to set up. So even if we are going to work toward manufacturing independence here in the United States, this is going to take a really, really, really long time to make it happen.
A lot of hypotheticals here, but as a political analyst, I do, of course, want to get your take on this and really how this could impact the average U.S. consumer. Again, a lot left to figure out here, but I want to get your take as, these tariffs go into effect.
Well, here's the thing. No one really knows whether this is a starting point in negotiation or an ending point. We all understand, or at least the general sentiment on the street is that these tariffs are a lot higher than anyone expected by a factor of 2 or 3. At this level, we're looking at an additional $3,000 to $4,000 per U.S. household per year. That's going to be a huge hole to fill in the consumer and is going to cause a lot of issues with the electorate, right? People don't like higher prices. Along with higher prices, this is forecast for slower growth, possibly even a recession and higher unemployment. And those all have political consequences. So again, even if you're for this and you're a cheerleader for the Trump agenda, this is net negative in the short term, even if it's positive in the long term. As we all know, politics is chronically short term. So yes, the elections for the midterm elections for the House are right around the corner and for many seats in the Senate. And we may see many losses for Republicans if this does not turn around before then.
One thing that's important to note here, we're talking about tariffs of 20% on the European Union, that is allies of the U.S. So how are the allies responding to this? We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel is going to visit the White House tomorrow and has said those tariffs will be kind of top of mind alongside, of course, the war in Gaza.
Yeah, and this is part of the uncertainty, right? So Israel has come out and said we're taking down all tariffs. So therefore, we should have free trade with Israel. Israel is, of course, a very small trading partner of the United States. So let's move over to something like Vietnam, which has become far more important since we've tried to remove a lot of supply chains out of China. Almost all of our shoes, if you wear Nikes, are probably from Vietnam. And the Communist Party chair of Vietnam has come out and said, hey, we're going to do the same thing as Israel. We're going to drop all tariffs. So what people are hoping for is that these countries say, hey, listen, we're going to drop all tariffs so you don't slap us with more tariffs. So countries basically have two options. One, they can say, you know what? You're right, Trump administration. We're going to drop all tariffs and let's have free trade. Or they can band together against America, which China seems to be taking this approach, and slap more tariffs, which causes a trade war, which causes more economic dislocation and more cost for U.S. consumers and U.S. businesses. Tariffs are a tax, no matter how you spin it. And if there is a trade war, we're looking at higher taxes for U.S. consumers.
I have to ask, this is something that I've spoken to a lot of experts about, and I want to get your take on this as well. Why should the average American really be paying attention to this? Because you see what's happening with the stock market. You also hear tariffs, taxes, a lot of numbers that are thrown your way. So you say, maybe I'm going to tune out. Why should the average American care?
The average American should care because this affects everything you buy and your way of life. You know, the U.S. system didn't come about overnight. It involves a lot of free trade with countries around the world. If you ask your parents or if your grandparents, if you're lucky enough to still have them around, they'll tell you of a time when we didn't have as many products in the store. This whole idea, I mean, when we were kids, right, we didn't have fruit year round. We didn't have all the same fruits in the grocery store. That really came about because of Mexican exports, which of course is less cold in Mexico than here in the United States. So our system is really something that we've gotten very used to. And we haven't had tariffs this high in the past 100 years or perhaps even more. And the last time we had tariffs this high, it aggravated the Great Depression. So we're looking at specific economic dislocation for a lot of regular Americans. And Americans are not typically political animals like I am, or maybe like you are, but they do understand higher prices, slower growth, and losing their job.
All right, David Grasso, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
I think you need to look at what type of deals we're going to have, because Donald Trump is fundamentally a deal maker, right? So if this rolls differently, we'll have a lot of free trade agreements with countries around the world. And of course, free and unfettered trade with an even playing field is what we all want.
All right, David, thank you again for taking the time to join us here. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
And I do want to pop this up on your screen right here, as we did get a statement that came in on Saturday from the White House Deputy Press Secretary as he was asked about the tariffs and, of course, the stock market. He said, quote, "This past November, America resoundingly rejected the business as usual policies coming out of D.C. The entire Trump administration is aligned on delivering on President Trump's mandate to reject the status quo."